Well, good morning. Most of you guys have received your SDRP, which is the Supplemental Disaster Relief Program apps from the FSA in the mail. On those letters that you got, it says contact your crop insurance agent or the FSA for questions. Well, we knew there'd be a lot of questions. So this video is going to walk you through where the heck these numbers came from on your app, how much that you can expect to get, and just kind of how to double check that things are correct, which they certainly should be in this round one if they pulled it from the RMA. So here we go. I'm going to walk you through a presentation. So on this SDRP program, there is a fair amount of math that goes into this, but it's relatively straightforward once you understand how it works. So SDRP stands for Supplemental Disaster Relief Program. That's what you guys are getting payments for the 23 crop year and the 24 crop year in this program potentially. Apps began printing July 9th. 2023 we qualified for just automatically because we were in a D3 or worse drought. And so that one there was no gray area on. 24 we needed to prove excessive heat in order for you to qualify for that year in Toole or Toole County or up along the High Line, because at least Toole and Liberty and Hill counties, I believe, weren't in a D3 drought or a D2 quite long enough to qualify. But we did have some pretty impressive heat in 24 that caused a lot of that crop damage. So the reason we need to make sure we write excessive heat on these applications for 24 when you submit those is that the crop insurance cause of loss that's submitted usually just says drought. We're going to change that at our agency going forward too, where we comment if there is excessive heat events to in the comments below, and then the adjuster can add a secondary cause of loss. But for now, it sounds like if we can put excessive heat on the 24 applications, we very well will qualify for that year as well. So this basically what this program does. So if you chose the 75% crop insurance level, this now insures you up to the 92.5% level. Very similar to what ECO and SEO did for you on your crop insurance if you guys elected that. It just went up to 95%. The good thing is they're not penalizing us for taking ECO and SEO. The previous disaster programs that were issued, they basically gave the people that didn't elect ECO and SEO at least some percentage of what we received, and they didn't have to pay premium into that to get that, right? Now they're saying, hey, you paid for ECO and SEO, we're not going to count that against you. So those of us that did that basically kind of get to double dip in this program, which is how it should be. So basically you'll get another ECO and SEO payment, but just a percentage of that up front, basically, for the crop years that this applies to. It's only paying out 35% of the calculation to start with, so there will be a top-off payment at the end once they know how much money is left. It's just very hard to predict for them in this program how much money it's going to take to pay all of this out, because they also pay for losses that are shallow loss things that there was no loss for on the crop insurance side. So that'll be the round two stuff that needs to finish out before they can top that up. But they're nice enough to at least jump out here and give us 35% right off the bat. To qualify for stage one, which is the quick money, quick application, pre-filled stuff, you must have had a crop insurance indemnity for that crop year. So if some of you guys didn't get an app, let's say for 23, but you did for 24, it very well might be for that crop in 23 you didn't have a loss, let's say. It doesn't mean you may not qualify for this going forward, but you're going to have to skip ahead to stage two before you get paid on those years where you didn't have an underlying crop insurance loss. This is not an SEO or ECO loss. Remember, they're not considering those. This is your farm individually having a loss that would trigger your stage one payment. So here's an application. This is our application we just got for the 23 crop year, I think. You can see up on the top here, I'll get my pointer working. We've got barley on this top line. EU means we're in enterprise units, so it's going to list all of our barley for that county all on one line. If we were in optional units, it would list every unit split out for barley. So this could be 5 pages of barley. And that's why for you guys that are in optional units or you have multiple counties, you're going to see more than one barley line. Our app is simplistic here because all of these are in one county and they're all enterprise units. So the one thing we really want to make sure we do correctly is in this disaster event area, especially for 24, because that really was what caused most of our losses, was not only was it dry, but then the heat hit so bad in July that it really knocked the yields back. So on your disaster event area here, make sure you not only write drought in here, but write excessive heat. That allows the county committee to review those applications for 24. Make sure, because we don't qualify for the drought end automatically, because we didn't hit the D3 drought or D2 for 8 weeks in 24, it's really important that we put excessive heat in here as well, because that was really one of the major causes of loss. So if you're a guy on the high line here that got this and it really was excessive heat that caused your loss, add that in there as well. I talked to the FSA about this yesterday, and they said I would add in every potential listed payable disaster event that we had in that crop year in that column. Well, we do know excessive heat was probably a big one, and that's one that oftentimes wasn't reported as the cause of loss in the crop insurance. It usually would say drought there. So make sure you do that. You're going to see your estimated SDRP payments, $92,573, let's say, on this crop. We're not going to get all of that up front, right? We're only going to get 35% of that, but I'm going to take you through how they come up with that number. The other thing that's confusing here is it asks you what percent share each one of these people has. So on this scenario, we've got Wendy and I that are SBIs underneath our LLC. The LLC was the operator. They're the ones that actually got all the crop insurance income. So in this scenario, we'd be 100% of this payment going to KWA LLC. There are other scenarios where you might have a spousal policy or a partnership maybe where these percents would get doled out to individual people. And that's where, if there's any question on this, or maybe don't even fill that part out until you get into the FSA and ask them how you're structured. But for the most part, from what I understood talking to the FSA, 95% of the apps, the primary, the P on here will be who gets 100% of this payment. There are scenarios though where we need to split this up, prorated out amongst people on here. So make sure you talk to the FSA and fill out the share part correctly. List the disaster events in each one of these columns for each crop, right? Because they very well could have been different things, but you need to have that listed on this app. The county committee then will go through and they'll either approve or disapprove these. They'll pretty much be rubber stamped for 23 because we were in a D3 drought, but in 24 we need to make sure we have all of the causes of loss listed on this app. So where the heck did these numbers come from? Where did they get that $92,000 on our barley? So your crop insurance level determines what the payment factor is in this program. The lower you elected on your crop insurance for that crop year, the less total payout you're going to get, as you'll see on this chart. So in this scenario, we elected the 75% crop insurance level, and for 95% of our customers, that's where you guys are at, is at 75% in enterprise units with SEO and ECO stacked. And so that's why I'm going to use that for this example. So we elected 75%, but less than 80%. And so our payment factor for this program, and this is just your underlying insurance before we stack ECO and SEO, our SDRP factor then is 92.5%. So what this means is they're going to go back and rework your claim or that crop year as though you were insured at 92.5% instead of 75%. And that's where this number comes from on your app. There is some more factors that go in there to reconcile that, which took me a long time to figure out, but I'll show you where the total number comes from there. So our factor for everything on our farm was 92.5% because we're at the 75% level like we showed on that chart. So basically the claim is reworked using the 92.5% level instead of 75% on your underlying insurance. For most of you, if you were in ECO and SEO, you received 100% payment in those programs for 23 and 24 because it was bad enough up here on the high line. So this makes figuring this payment amount out on this program a little bit simpler. So because you were in ECO and SEO, those programs, those county programs paid you up to the 95% level. The SDRP payment you're going to get from the FSA basically mirrors that same payment formula, except it's only going to pay you up to 92.5% instead of 95. So for this example, which is most of our customer base, you're going to get that number on your app is 87.5% of what you got for ECO and SEO. And the reason for that is this program's only paying you up to 92.5% instead of 95 like the ECO SEO did. So that ends up being 87.5%. And I could take you through the numbers if you want, but That's what it is. So they also throw your non-ECO, SEO premium and the $30 admin fee into this calculation. So this is where I was having trouble reconciling it before. I finally found the formula on how this works. So here's an example at the 75% level. So you had a $100,000 ECO, SEO loss, we're going to say, just for round numbers here in 23. You had a $10,000 premium for your RP premium. So that's for your underlying insurance, not excluding the ECO and SEO. So your farmer paid premium was $10,000, plus there was a $30 admin fee in this example. They take the $100,000 ECO, SEO losses. This is how I would figure this for most of you guys. Times 87.5%, because we're not quite getting that full 95% for what they use for this program. So that's $87,500 plus the $10,000 in premium that you paid for your underlying insurance plus a $30 admin fee would give us a $97,530 SDRP potential payment here. Now they're only going to pay 35% of that, right, up front. So in this payment, in this round of payments, even though your app shows $97,000 in this example, you're only going to get 35% of that when you submit this to start off with. So 35% of the $97,530 means we would get a $34,135 SDRP payment for our barley in 23 for this example. And it would just roll along on every crop and refigure it that way. This could be topped off later, but they're going to have to complete round 2 before that happens. So it's going to be quite a while before we get the top-up payments because that round 2 stuff can stretch out for a year probably after they open this program up. But the good news is we will get 35% of what that's showing on those sheets for you guys here probably in the next month or so would be my guess. So what happens if I didn't have ECO and SEO? That's totally fine. If you just took the 75% level on your insurance and didn't have ECO and SEO, they're going to go back, refigure your claim as though it was at 92.5%, and they're going to come up with the same number as they did for us ECO and SEO people. It's just harder to figure out what your payment's going to be on our side because we don't have that base that you got for payment for ECO and SEO to factor backwards. But that part doesn't really matter because that's on your application anyways, right? You're seeing what your base is for that payment, and that was all figured off of this same formula at the RMA. So this is another really good reason to be an ECO and SEO. I'm going to show you some things that were added in the big beautiful bill here too that will give you even more reason to be in those programs. But the people that were in ECO and SEO got the full payments on that. Now they're going to go back and get the exact same disaster money as the guys that weren't in it. So huge bumps for being in those programs. So I didn't have a claim for 23 or 24, but my farm is below that, let's say 92% trigger level. Will I get paid? So that's what round 2 is for. You'll have to request an app when available from the FSA and fill it out if you fall into that. So make sure you go back and look at your yields for those crop years. And if they were above a claim, but not very far above, you might still qualify for some money in this program. You're just going to have to wait for round 2. This is going to take longer to process because this is based on individual farms and they're not pulling data from the RMA so much for this program. So yes, you very well might still qualify for some money. So if you didn't receive apps in this first round, that's probably because you didn't have claims in 23 or 24, but you very well still might qualify for some money here. So that kind of covers the SDRP stuff. If you guys have any questions, please just let me know. I'd be glad to go through that with you individually. I double checked our stuff and it all reconciled, it looks like, now that I understand how the formula works. So it looks like they have everything correct on the calculation side. We're glad to double check your numbers for you before you take that in if you want. But most importantly, go into the FSA and discuss the share part of that before you fill it out. So the big beautiful bill. So this is something else that passed. So basically they kind of passed the farm bill in this big beautiful bill. And there's some positive things in there. So in the BBB, I'm going to call it going forward here anyways, the barley PLC price increased to $5.45 from $4.95 a bushel. This will apply to the 25 crop year. Currently, we're projected at $5.30 a bushel for barley. That's going to drop if things keep going the way they are. But good news is we almost never got PLC payments on barley in the past. And because they raised these prices, I think we're going to for the 25 crop year. Now you won't get these payments until the fall of 26, but regardless, that's money we can put on our balance sheets, right? Wheat was an even bigger one, so they increased the base for the PLC for wheat to $6.35 a bushel from $5.56, which would give us an 80 cent a bushel projected payment from what would have been not a very large payment at all. So if you guys have a 30 bushel PLC yield at the FSA now, your payment would be figured at 80 cents a bushel times 30. Now these prices don't finish figuring until June of next year for the 25 crop year, but if things keep trending the way they are, we're going to be in pretty sizable payments now that they up these prices, which would be very helpful because things are hard to cash flow. There's a one-time chance to increase your base acres in this bill, not to exceed 30 million nationally. One thing I watched said they're probably going to cap the amount we can add in base acres to 30% of what we had for seeded acres in those years. But regardless, for us that are farming 100% of our farm ground now, but our base acres were based off of 50% crop fallow, this is really going to help to have a chance to increase these base acres for the PLC and ARC programs. So crop insurance subsidies actually increased for ECO and SEO for those county-based programs up to 80%. This makes these programs an absolute no-brainer to do. So please, if you are not signed up in that, I don't care if you're in a wet area of Montana, I've seen time and time again these programs trigger just because the market's dropped, or because if you're in a really wet area, your county yield's so high, it takes a very little blip in rain for this to pay. So going forward for the 26 crop year, we're going to get increased premium subsidies there, slight increases in our premium subsidy on the underlying insurance. In 2025, you also are going to get automatically the better of the ARC or the PLC program. So if you elected PLC for 25 but ARC ends up paying more, they will switch. They will actually allow you to cash in on the ARC payment just for this crop year. That's just because things are so poor, I think, here in farming. They removed the SEO and ARC rule. That's another big one. So before you couldn't be an ARC and be an SEO at the same time. That created some weird issues on the back end. They've eliminated that. So you can pick either PLC or ARC and still be an SEO. That's a really positive change. Pass-through entity deduction increased. It will increase here for this next tax year, I believe, from 20% to 23%. That's a huge thing. If you're making money and passing it through, they're going to actually write off about 20 to 23% potentially of that income before you're taxed on it. So it's been 20% up till now, I believe, and that was about to expire, so they renewed that and increased it a little. The gift tax exemption went from 15 million per individual, or increased to 15 million per individual, 30 million per couple. Then Section 129 also got increased to 2.5 million, and they extended the bonus depreciation for 4 years, which is a big deal if you want to buy equipment and write it off. So lots of positive changes on the farming end in the big, beautiful bill. Remember, it's been since 2014, really, since they updated the Farm Bill, so there was some needed changes in here. But I do have to give some major kudos to the Montana Grain Growers Association. They were a big part of the lobby for getting this stuff done. If you're not a member of that association, I would seriously consider joining that, because I got on the board on that a few years ago, and I will tell you they are doing a lot of good in the back end pushing for this stuff. Between them, the National Wheat and Barley guys and all of that, there is a lot of work done to speak on your guys' behalf. So these things don't just happen. There's a lot of lobbying that was done on the back end, and I think it was much needed changes because we were looking at some pretty tough times in farming. So anyways, that covers my presentation for all of this. If you guys have any more questions, please let me know. If you get the app in the mail, I would take that into your local FSA office and drop it off there. Review the shares with them, sign it, and then drop it off, because I think that's probably the smoothest that you possibly could make this go, by actually taking that in and making sure it's filled out correctly. Other than that, if you have any more questions, please let me know. Thank you for taking the time to watch all of this, and I'm excited to get some cash injected back into farming, because it was looking pretty bleak here, and this isn't going to fix everything, but it's certainly going to help. So thanks, guys. We'll keep you updated as things change here.